I got a new mic. The other one wasn't working all that great, but the new one seems to be working pretty well. I've only done a few, just random tests, and it seemed fine, but hopefully I'm coming through loud and clear. This is a video that, when we last left off in the previous video, I had basically just done the sketch of Rainer. He's the guy who's got, his arm kind of, lifted and curled, and, his hair is covering one of his eyes. And I when I hit the record button, I had the wrong thing selected in OBS, so I was just recording random audio, which, because it wasn't very good in the first place, it was kind of random, but it was me humming and singing to myself like an idiot. So when I went back to try to start making a video of it, all I had was my horrible music. But what I will yammer about concerning Rainer, you see his hair's a little bit messy. It's a bit messy, kind of like Lucas's, but it covers one of his eyes. And the reason I did that was because the character, he can foretell, he can see the future. He can see possible futures. I had mentioned this last time, so it was while he's partially in the present, but partially in the future, the things he's seeing are obscured to everyone else and not actual. They, in some cases, they will be actual, but he's seeing a lot of things that they themselves are not actually actual. They are, some of those futures are going to be terminated and won't actually come to pass. I talked a little bit about that last time. In this video, I actually started drawing a shirt on Lucas, which, I don't know. I used a non-destructive way of creating that, so I could take the shirt off again later. I wasn't sure. I eventually decided on some kind of cozy-looking hoodie for him, but I was okay, everybody else is kind of dressed nice. Everybody else is presentable. It's this guy needs to, even though he probably does lounge around his studio, without a shirt on, wouldn't be unusual. I decided I didn't want him to. He's strong. He's got a great physique. He's got a Johnny Bravo physique. So he's also. He knows when to be modest. And if he's going to be seen by millions of eyes, he better put a shirt on. This isn't OnlyFans. This is YouTube. The rest of this video, I make some changes to Aiden, the chick to the far right, in the center, to the right of Owen, the dude with the long hair. Mainly because she's a bit too skinny, and while she's not ripped, I started thinking about this because I was drawing Claudia next. Aiden, she's built a little bit more she fights. She's a very physically active character, and granted, yes, sure, she's a vampire. Her body doesn't work the same way that a living person's body does. She's not a lightweight either. She does end up developing, growing stronger. I had kind of thought maybe something I don't know, a gymnast in terms of arm and leg strength, something like that. So she's actually a pretty tough character. But I was thinking a little bit about it because Claudia is the next character that I'll start in this video. And Claudia, that's Owen's wife. She is strong. She is a tough chick. And she's I've probably mentioned her in the same video where I was talking about Owen and doing artwork for him. They were both in, I don't know, Northern Central European, basically peoples forgotten to time. Claudia, her story was, she was discovered by Owen. Owen found her when he was out in the wilderness. He was already a vampire at this point, and he heard beautiful singing. One night he heard this beautiful and melodic singing, and he went to investigate, and he found this cave, and in this cave he found the skeletal remains, tons and tons of skeletal remains of tons and tons, lots of people, lots of dead skeletal remains in Viking armor and with weapons spears and swords and axes and shields and stuff like that. And Claudia, who was also wearing some old, the armor was old, it had been weathered for a long time, it wasn't in functioning condition, it couldn't suffer anything without just falling apart, which is exactly what happened. Because when they saw, she woke up, all she remembered was she woke up in this cave and she was surrounded by the dead, who she presumed to be her people, but she didn't really know anything about them. She didn't recognize anything. She had no memories. She just woke up and she was sleeping on this sort of this stone altar in the middle of this cave, deep in the side of this mountain. And there were basically just a bunch of dead skeletons all around her. And so she was alone. She was wearing the same sorts of garb, the same sorts of attire that they were. But she didn't know what any of it was for. What happened, why she was there, what happened to those people. And so one night she was singing a song to the moon because the moon looked so pretty. And that's when Owen found her. And he knew that she was a monster, just like himself. And she was also a little less stable, we'll say. She was not so stable. And she attacked him. She said something in her ancient tongue, which he vaguely recognized, and they fought. And they fought for several days, beneath the cover of the trees and in the shade of the mountains. And then at the end of the fight, it was one of those fights that ended in, we will say, in a YouTube-friendly way, romantic embrace, where they both were winners. And they've basically been partners ever since. Owen is someone who is prone to frustration, and it's sort of like a moodiness, but it's also accompanied with rage, like anger. And Claudia is somebody who there are various ways that they effectively, like, that she's able to help him navigate that. She enjoys combat, Claudia. So it's like Owen enjoys combat, Aiden enjoys it, and so does Claudia. And Aiden will tell you, like, yeah, we're probably the best fighters in the group. We're probably if you need to put down a monster, like a werewolf or another vampire, one of us we're the most predisposed to doing it, and we're probably going to succeed quicker than anyone else in the family can. So Claudia and Owen will sometimes spar, and this ends up being something of a, I guess, an oddity. If you're already like, a vampire, a blood-sucking creature of the night with like super speed and super strength, and you have like these supernatural bouts of rage, your marital relationship is probably not going to look exactly the same as an ordinary person's. And so Owen likes to fight, his wife likes to fight, and so when he's in a particularly sensitive mood, sometimes they just settle it with a spar, like wrestling and fighting, and sort of fight that, like, maybe they knock a wall down, maybe they smash each other through a tree, and then it ends much as how they met. It ends as it began, with passionate maritals. Aiden, being the resident psychic, usually likes to just leave when Owen's getting in a moody state, because she's like, I know everything that's going on. I know their thoughts. I hear it in painful detail. And it's better if I just go to the library and nerd out for a night, so that I don't have to subject myself to that sort of thing. That's pretty much the long and short of the character. She doesn't really have. I've considered giving her extra abilities, like extra stuff to her vampire kit, but as it is now, I haven't really given her too much. She's very strong, very durable. More trigger happy than she should be when getting into conflict and violence. It's gotten her into trouble. She's not dumb. She's just intense. She's just passionate. I'm going to go ahead and pause the audio here now. I continue editing Aiden for a bit, but I'm going to have more audio later in the video when it gets to the point where I start drawing Claudia. Anyway, you all take care, and thank you for watching. Alright, so this is the point where I start finally drawing Claudia. She's was a bit more difficult to draw than some of the other females because she is supposed to be strong. She's supposed to look like a fit chick. But part of the problem when you're drawing fit chicks is sometimes they can start looking mannish. And the good way to balance that is, like, as they get stronger shoulders, you don't want to neglect the hips, you know, the hips and thighs and stuff. It's like when you're drawing a strong dude, you get that V shape, right? You get the broad shoulders and the small waist, you know, as I mentioned Johnny Bravo before, right? Like, he's a very good example of that. When you're drawing a fit chick, if you keep up with that V shape, she just ends up looking too much like a dude. You want to keep the hourglass. So as you make the shoulders broader, you also want to make the hips broader too. At least this is how I prefer to draw the characters. I also enjoy drawing fit characters anyway. Like, there's, you know, everybody in this picture, it's basically just like, how fit do these characters look? Even Claire is more fit than she looks. She just is wearing a jacket, so you can't really see too much. But it's like, you know, Rainer is not as buff or strong as Owen, but he's still a buff dude. Even Lucas is like the smallest of them. He's the oldest and the smallest, but he's still like ripped. He still like has a model physique. So part of the reason is I think muscle is fun to draw. It's difficult, but as you learn it, it actually ends up becoming, I feel like it's the most rewarding. It's just because, especially like you look at that, like, you know, abs, and it's like what are they called? You have like different abdominal muscles. You have abdominals in the front and then abdominals in the side. And the side abdominals, you know, it has that zipper look, you know. So it's almost like, you know, you take this plane of skin, of anatomy, and then you start adding all these extra like details to it. This like combination of minor details, interlocking details even. And the visual interest just goes way up, in my opinion. It's part of why I like, you know, superhero characters are often fun. But for me, it's also, I like when a character's physique is representative of their physical ability. I think Chun-Li is a great example, where it's like, you know, I don't actually know, I don't play Street Fighter a lot. I'm just familiar with it as a cultural phenomenon, right? I don't play a lot of fighting games. But, you know, at least in some of the older Street Fighter games, they'd have those challenges where it's like, I can't say that on YouTube. Beat up this car, right? Like your character would, you'd have to like destroy a car, and it was on a timer, and however much of the car you were able to break and destroy, you know, combo up and break, you would get more points. Old Mortal Kombat games did the same thing, but it would be similar. Like they'd stack those bricks, and you'd have to time it. So like the timing, so your character would like smash the brick, like punch down on it and snap them in half. But it's like, you look at someone like Chun-Li, and she has these like thighs, skull breakers or skull crushers, skull crusher thighs, and she's kicking this car down into its like base component parts. And you look at her and you're like, yeah, I believe she could do that. Like, I feel like those legs could dismantle a car strategically through whirlwind kick combos. I guess I don't particularly like vampires. I understand they're a good excuse for this, but I don't like characters generally who they are very skinny, you know, like Barbie with a claymore, that kind of thing. It's like if a chick's wielding a claymore, I like her to look somewhat believable in that capacity. Like you'd think she could wield that, actually swing that thing around, right? I've seen images of Red Sonja. A lot of like fan art will either like make her like the Barbie with a claymore, while others will actually give her some muscle definition. And I do think muscle definition, both for men and women, is just a way more interesting way to draw characters. But it's like, if I do draw a skinny character or a slender character, I'll still draw some muscle, because it's like the idea is like low body fat, and people are going to have muscle, and some of that muscle is going to be visible as a consequence of their low body fat. Also, the ribs might be visible too. They're more likely to be visible for a character with low body fat also. And it has a similar like visual interest effect that like having, interlocking abdominal muscles has, adding those extra lines. So it's like if I have a skinny character, they're generally not going to be very good at combat. They're not going to be a combat powerhouse or something. If I do have a character with muscles, chances are they're going to be a combat powerhouse. There's some flexibility there when you deal with supernatural characters like vampires, like all these vampire characters, and it's part of the reason I went back and I buffed up Aiden some, because she is supposed to look a bit more like a gymnast in the arms. So the same is true with Claudia, and more so when I get the character done. I think I get the entire character drawn up. I don't start the color until later. I'll try to get that video out later this week. But Claudia, of the female characters, she's the one that does look the most like she could, fold you up like a pretzel. And because she's a vampire, then eat you. But she's potentially, in some ways, she's the most mysterious with regards to her history. In terms of actually interacting with her as a character, she feels very much like the least mysterious. She's a bit strange, because none of the characters actually feel like they're connected to the real world. After you get to a certain point, it's like everybody you knew in life, they pass on. They might have kids, and they have kids, and they have kids, and it's like after so many generations, the world you knew is not really visible to you anymore. The cultures and civilizations have changed, and so many of the things that people do take seriously, the vampire characters, they'll be polite. They can be polite and cordial with you, but generally they're just not going to be connected to the things that you would be. And Claudia, in some ways, is probably the most flippant, because she doesn't even remember the world that she came from. That world is forgotten even to her. Like, those people are forgotten even to her. She just woke up in a cave one day as a fully formed vampire, and and she had this craving, this desire for blood, this need to feed that she couldn't understand. And it seemed that other people didn't. All she's known is the life of a monster. And so having someone like Owen in her life really helps keep her balanced and centered. Although the Ritters generally she has acclimated very well. Claire is the leader of the family. And she's a very different character from Claudia, where she does think in terms of future, and she does think in terms of keeping the family, the clan, essentially organized and thriving well into the future. Claudia is less organized. She's probably the sort of character who, she's not explicitly malicious or evil, but she probably would still be feeding on people. She's not going to make a sport out of it, though, because it's, in a lot of ways, it would be like crushing ants. It's not something that's particularly sporting for her, like maybe fighting and killing other things like other vampires or werewolves or other monsters like that. That would be a challenge. That would be a sport. That would be something that she would be more likely to engage. So that the Ritters themselves, they get blood bags, or they'll feed on animals or something like that, which isn't as it's not as nourishing, but it'll do the trick. She does it primarily because her husband believes that this is what they should be doing. This is something that they should be striving to succeed at and accomplish. She understands the reasoning behind it, but in terms, like, her heart's not in it like it is for him. If anything, her heart is more in him and the family. And so it's more for their sake that she maintains that mandate. Avoiding cannibalism, essentially. Like, don't forget your humanity, right? Because if you're not a human, it's not technically cannibalism. But if you hold on to your humanity, then it still is cannibalism. And cannibalism is wrong, at least until it becomes politically salient, and then you'll be canophobic, I guess, or however that goes. So I guess I don't really have too terribly much to say. Owen and Claudia have much more fleshed out histories than some of the other characters. I still haven't really decided anything for Rainer. I haven't really settled on it, and it hasn't been necessary. But I have an idea of, kind of a vague idea for Rafaela, kind of an idea for Rainer. I forget to record his drawing video, and of the characters, he's also the one I don't really have a history for, and of the characters, he has a mind for the future anyway. I'm noticing a pattern. The Claire and Lucas have actually. Claire probably has the most detailed history. Hers is pretty thick. But she's also the oldest, and maybe I'll cover that at some point. I'll try to get the colored versions of these images up later this week. I hope everybody is well. Take care, and also thank you for watching this in advance. If you have any questions concerning writing or drawing, mostly these videos are concerning writings, but I'm still doing like the rough draft of a story, making progress on that, while also just drawing these characters, because this is always something I've enjoyed doing. So I just thought maybe I should, rather than just keeping it like personal projects, actually just start like figuring out how to turn these into things that I can share with other people, share with the world. And I'm just feeling it out as I go along. But I'm happy to discuss these things. I'm happy to talk about it. So if you have any questions, let me know. I guess those YouTube essentials: like, subscribe, and comment with your favorite food and or color. or anything relevant to the video. Take care and have a nice day.